Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com. You can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our new altar sleeves, super duper cool. You can get your custom sleeve image of the Magic Mike's crew at altarsleeves.com/magicmikes. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
How's it going? Is my bun in the frame? Is that?
Oh, it's there. It's chilling. Mine is not. Ruben Bressler, how you doing?
My bun is always in the frame.
In the frame, right up
We can
front.
get you a wig or a hairpiece. We can get you a big bun.
I have a wig that I wear. I don't have it in front of me for Claw when I'm doing Dice Ex Machina, and he's got a man bun. So
well,
I've got a little bun in the oven.
Do you pull it back so it makes you look a little younger?
So the wig doesn't pull my face back, so I've constantly got the dark raccoon.
Oh right, but sometimes you put on like I know.
Like the hair
wig
net?
tape,
Yeah.
wig tape, and
I
Sure.
was going to say, little, just some pulling, some yanking.
Pull it back a little
cheaper
bit.
than a nip and a tuck. You live in LA. You got to think of this stuff.
Listen,
You got to get creative now.
I gotta bump that up to being an LA7.
That's right. So we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent in letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 mono green humans. Ruben?
There were a couple of folks who agreed that this was the biggest omission of our list last week, and Alexander Zero, I think, put it most eloquently when they write, "For my honorable mention, it's not necessarily for the card itself, though it is a good card. For 1 and a green, you get a 1/1 mana dork, not a bad rate on its own, but it also has a bit of late game value, in that when you reach threshold, it gets +3/+3, turning it into a 4/4, a solid body almost always. For those who don't recognize it, I'm referring to Werebear, originally a bear druid, and later added typing layer of human, so it's a human bear druid.
It's true.
But what makes this my choice for honorable mention is the original Odyssey flavor text. He exercises his right to bear arms. Perfect. Chef's kiss.
We're all about the bears here, right, Evan?
I mean, come on now. Werebear is green and generic mana for a 1/1 common human bear druid that taps to add a green mana and has threshold. It gets +3/+3, which means if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, it gets +3/+3. I do not like the fact that they changed the flavor text. That was not okay. Everyone likes this silly, stupid pun.
Everyone loves the worst joke ever.
Yes, just let Rosewater have his bad jokes. It's okay.
Right.
It's not a big
I
deal.
also, if you're a fan of bears, I recently drafted the Bears of Litjara in the Kaldheim draft, and that card is not fair in Limited. Holy crap.
Like, just 2 changelings, and it's just off the charts ridiculous.
I mean, just by itself, it's kind of unbeatable.
Yeah, it's really strong. Congratulations to Alexander Zero. Please contact Erin on social media before she blocks you on all of them. She's searching right now.
Except for one. It's like a shell game. Like,
Right.
Yeah. She keeps you guessing. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week. And maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because it is time to talk about the top 10 zero power creatures. Now, last week, I included the Noble Hierarch and Ruben didn't. And this week, I'm not including a Noble Hierarch, and Ruben is still not including a Noble Hierarch.
I've had Noble Hierarch as number 1 on 3 different lists.
Wow.
I
Yeah,
think.
we've given that card lots of time and attention,
but
and energy.
hopefully
and
Aaron picks up our slack. We'll see. No spoilers.
We'll see.
But if you want to yell at us about any of our... I mean, there's a couple of notable omissions. Look, we've done 130 of these.
I was literally, actually 153.
just think of it like this. If there's something we've missed, that's your cue, listeners, to jump in the comments and win yourself a $50 gift card or whatever it is.
Tell us how wrong we are.
Yeah.
This is one of those things. I was honestly thinking, like, do we have like a Magic Mike's top 10, Hall of Fame where we're not going to put Delver on any more lists.
Right.
We're
We just
not going to put
retire
Noble Hierarch.
stuff.
I won't pick Grave Troll anymore.
Right. We've done it enough. We know we love the card. We
No
have
Grave
to move
Troll on this list, Aaron?
No Grave Troll. Well, I think Evan said, didn't Evan request that we not do counters? Where
Right.
It's just 0.
So-
Right. But
There are some ways to be like...
I did not. There are no dredge cards on my
cards
list.
on a
so
list.
it's fine, but it's one of those things where you're able to define what it means to you and no hard feelings,
Exactly.
whatever.
It is a weird catch-22, though, where it's like, if we don't put these things on there, then there are the people who are like, she didn't put a Grave Troll, what's going
There's
on?
no
It's
walking
like,
ballista.
what do you want me to
do? Yeah.
Yeah, so let's move on here to number 10. Ruben, what's your number 10?
So my list is all cards that have 0 power.
Okay.
Like they don't come in with +1/+1 counters. They don't say, this gets +1/+0 for each snowland you control, like Spirit of the Alderune or whatever that was called.
Mm-hmm.
They all are 0 somethings. And a lot of the 0 somethings, when you search the list of 700 some, are walls. And I have a walls commander deck, Arcades the Strategist. And for a long time, the most expensive, and it still might be, the most expensive card in that deck, shout out to Homeland's Wall of Kelp.
Oh my god.
Wall of Kelp is blue for an 0/3 plant wall with Defender, originally from Homelands, and only ever reprinted in Masters Edition 2 because it is part of the reserved list. It has Defender, and it has an activated ability of blue tap : create an 0/1 blue plant wall creature token with Defender named Kelp.
$8.
Yep, $8.
$8 for anything from Homelands is astonishing. And thank you, Reserve List. The only defender that it makes other defenders via activated ability.
Yeah,
Great.
and so there is a number of ways to go infinite with Wall of Kelp in that deck. With Axebane Guardian as your main mana source.
Oh, God.
You can do Intruder Alarm. There's a number of ways to go infinite.
If you're into devotion, you get your 2 blue pips at the top there. This is
right.
This is wild. I love the flavor text, though. You can eat it or you can weave it, but you can't fight in it.
And also, if you have an Arcades in play with this card, you just draw a card whenever you activate it. So I love a Wall of Kelp.
Wow.
It is quite the card. All right. Aaron, what's number 10?
So my number 10 is a card. Shapeshifter used to be a popular creature type. Like when you go back and look at old sets like Stronghold and Tempest, it feels like shapeshifters just came out quite frequently, and now we don't really see them anymore. And this is a card that I don't think I've ever cast or I've ever played, but I spent hours as a kid, because I was a kid when this set came out, just looking at it and going, what on earth is going on? Huge Ron Spencer fan here. My number 10 is Vulrath Shapeshifter. So Vulrath Shapeshifter is 1 colorless and 2 blue. It's a creature shapeshifter originally printed in Stronghold. $18. Probably on the reserve list.
Yes, it is.
As long as the top card of your graveyard is a creature card, Vulrath Shapeshifter has the full text of that card and has the text 2 colorless, discard a card. And you can pay 2 colorless to discard a card, and it has 0 power and 1 toughness. But look at this art. So if I understand the story correctly, Gerard infiltrates the stronghold. They're trying to rescue Cisse. They think they found Cisse, and it ends up just being the shapeshifter. But look at this. Like, look at how grotesque this is. But look at also how beautiful it is in a really disturbing way. The colors that are used here, the use of muscle and sinew and skin and the puddles, and you can see like the broken test tube in the background. Like, this is just terrifying and gorgeous.
This is one of those things where like I don't want to, I want to, and I both not want to actually see this in action and how it rearranges itself into a different organism, basically.
Right. And it's very rare that you get a middle of an action shot on a Magic card. The only one I can really think of other than this is like Warren's Weirding, where typically you get like the as it's about to happen or after it happens, but not as it's happening, which I think is really interesting with Vulrath Shapeshifter. Vulrath Shapeshifter, by the way, was a central piece of a legacy deck in the early to mid 2000s, where you would have Vulrath Shapeshifter to be able to get around Phyrexian Dreadnoughts come into playability, and among other things. And you could use it as a combat trick when they like tried to kill it with a lightning bolt. You could discard an Acroma. There were lots of different ways to get a Vulrath Shapeshifter going.
Oh, that's kind of cool. And this is one of those cards that it shouldn't be $18. It should be a couple bucks, and they just include it in random commander sets. But nope, that's because we can't have nice things.
Well, I think also because it has Vulrath in the name, that might make it more difficult because you can't squeeze Vulrath. Like, obviously, when they reprinted Vulrath into that new, Sultai card, that was perfect. They probably could have put it in there. But, when you're looking at just random commander products, I could see how it would be a little jarring, and it may not go with the overall flavor.
Or just a master set, just throw whatever they gotta throw it. It's fine. Well,
Give it the Godzilla treatment. We'll figure it out.
Exactly. For my number 10 here, this is a card that has thankfully, honestly, gotten fairly reasonably competitively priced. When it first showed up, I was like, oh my god, this card has to be like one of the greatest casual cards I've ever seen. And then it was kind of okay. And then later, It got a little bit more expensive because it was a mythic in the set that it debuted, and then they printed it in Commander Night 2019, and everything was normal. And now for a couple bucks, you can get your own Clever Impersonator. Okay.
Yeah.
Clever Impersonator is 2 blue, 2 generic mana for a mythic shapeshifter that is a 0/0. But you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield. That's anything. Planeswalkers, enchantments, freaking artifacts, equipment.
Huge.
It doesn't matter. It's 4 mana for anything on the battlefield. That's insane.
Yeah. This card was inching towards $10 for a while there. And, you know, this was a card I had looked at in various Commander decks and was like, you know, I'd really like this. This was a card other Commander decks, because sometimes a net deck told me that I needed, and I'm more of a budget player. And I was like, I really don't want to spend that much. And so having it be reprinted and bumped down to a more reasonable $2 or $3 was just a godsend. And like you said, you know, there are so many clones out there, and the majority of the time it's a creature. You know, there are exceptions to this, but this probably was the biggest one of just almost anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Copies
you can
anything.
copy your, you know, Smothering Tithe, Heuristic Study, or other, you know, whatever's dominating the board at any given time, and be like, I'll have one of those. And it's the spiritual successor to Clone. Being only 4 mana is huge. This card is insane.
I have this in my Vanifar deck. It's just, you know, whatever I need to, whatever I want a copy of, I'll just go ahead and go look for it, and then whoop.
Yep. I love this design. I was like, my God, this is incredible. And it just, I was, you know, this is going to be like a $30, $40, $50 card. No, it's like 10, and then it went to 2. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Card's great. So we'll here to our number 9. Ruben, what you got?
So I have 2 hires on my list at 9 and 7. I am not surprised that my number 9 is higher on somebody else's list.
Okay. Fair enough. Miss Aaron, what is your number 9?
So my number 9 is a card that I had to remind myself existed until I was going through Scryfall, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a card, and this is really, really cool. I love a zombie, I love dead things, I love killing creatures, and so this is the perfect combination of everything I love, and the flavor text also makes me giggle as well. My number 9 is Unliving Psychopath.
Oh boy.
So Unliving Psychopath is 2 colorless and 2 black. It is a zombie assassin from Dissension, which goes for about 25 cents right now. So if you're into budget, this is right up your alley. It's a 0/4. You can pay 1 black, and Unliving Psychopath gets +1/-1 until end of turn. And you don't have to tap to do that. You can also pay 1 black and tap it to destroy target creature with power less than Unliving Psychopath's powers. So I love this. I love the way that you can kind of adjust the toughness based on what you need to kill. The flavor text is funny. The victim bears the marks of the Xotzok Impaler, but he was executed years ago, implying that he's not dead. And so if you're into zombie tribal, you know, this is a neat little removal spell to kind of one-off things. And, you know, you could probably strap some auras to it if you needed to and have a lot of fun with it.
And it survives your opponent's Sweltering Suns, which a lot of the zombies don't. Fun Broken Pact fact, the flavor text for this helped inspire the original story for the Broken Pact, because the victim bore a mark of a character that had died 10,000 years prior. Spoiler alert for those of you that haven't seen a show that's 3 years old that you probably won't ever watch. But it sort of helped inspire that sort of story. And I think that is it's a really indelible kind of trope. But he died years ago. Bum, bum, bum. And I think that's great.
Chekhov's gun was where? Oh my God.
It can even get aggressive. That little pump ability, if it has to get in there, sure.
Yeah, this is like a cool little like toolbox of a creature. You know, it does so many different weird little things, and it does it really well. I like that.
And a lot of zombie other cards have like death triggers, so being able to use that death trigger itself.
Right.
There's a lot of lords in zombies, so you can pump it up past a 3/1 most of the time. This card's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move here to my number 9. Speaking of great cards, this is more of a recent card, but that's okay because it has shown easily that it is awesome in Standard. It will be awesome forever and ever, more than likely. I love me a Gilded Goose. It's just, it does so much. It's going to gain you some life. It's going to get you forwarded mana. Like, it still blocks the 1 power people. Like, it's cool. It's so good. Gilded Goose showed up, of course, in Throne of Eldraine for a green mana for a 0/2. It's a rare bird that has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, you make a food token. That's the artifact that says 2 generic mana tap, sack, gain 3 life. For a green and a generic mana, tap, : make a food token, and tap, sacrifice a food, : add 1 mana of any color.
I mean, it's rare that a mana dork immediately finds a place in not only modern, but this also saw a little bit of play in vintage as well, because, when you're playing, with Urza, as people were trying to do, having a mana dork that also just gives you a free artifact is kind of where you want to be. And so, the fact that the card is so powerful that it can make an impact on multiple formats besides standard, just right out of the gate, really says something about the power level. And of course, you have the callback to, fairy tales and the Golden Goose and all of that. And, just a fantastic card that I'm not surprised, took off the way that it did.
Throne was where they kind of really hit the gas on power level of cards that they're making these days. And this was a clear example of, oh my God, it does what? And it even makes food? What?
I was going to say, the big turning point here, like they could have printed this 5 years ago, but it wouldn't have had the ability to make more food.
Exactly.
It would have just made the one and been able to sacrifice it.
Right.
But colorless and a green tap create a food token is such a late game ability. It's huge. I mean, if you have 2 Gilded Gooses and your opponent is like a sacrifice deck, you're just gaining 6 life a turn, which they can never catch up. It's crazy how much value Gilded Goose has.
And we saw that in the Gen Sacrifice deck with Korvath, I think it was, and just running away with the game. I think it was Trail of Crumbs was another one. Whenever
Crumbs,
yeah, and so that was a whole engine in of itself.
Oh yeah, Trail of Crumbs is actually just what it's called. Never mind.
Yeah, it all worked together in the the idea that this 1 mana O2 can just tie everything together. It is terrific.
Yeah, card is, I mean,
it's,
and also honk.
Moving here to number
Honk.
8.
Yeah, I mean, it came out. That's another good point. Is it came out right around the time that Goose game got popular, and so it was just perfect timing of something hitting a cultural milestone and also just being good at what it does.
I mean, hashtag never forget, the original sound effect when you played it was that eagle screech on Arena, and everyone's like, no, will not stand. It lasted about 3 or 4 days before they put the honk sound in.
Yeah.
Ruben, what's number 8?
My number 8 is a card that I have cast before. It is on my checklist of cards I've cast before, but I don't remember it for having cast it. I remember it for the art. And I don't know why this card looks like this. I don't know why, what the art description could have possibly been that they sent to Amy Weber for Time Elemental.
Oh, yes.
But it's always been an indelible Magic card image in my head. And for a lot of people, too, I think.
For sure.
Time Elemental is an O2 for 2 colorless and a blue to make a creature elemental originally from Legends. When it attacks or blocks, at the end of combat, sacrifice it and it deals 5 damage to you. Okay. Pay 2 colorless blue, and tap. Return target permanent that isn't enchanted to its owner's hand. So, it's not a good card.
It was a weird card. It was really.
Well, I mean,
really
I understand. I understand what they were trying to do, and that this is supposed to be kind of controlling, where you really just want to be bouncing things, and if you have to attack or block, well, then it does damage to you. I get where they're going with it, but you're right. This art is ridiculous. You have this creature that appears to be made up of different timepieces. A very steampunk look to it. This was another card that really fascinated me as a kid, where I would just sort of look at it and go, "There's just so much happening here." There's so much happening here.
I got to literally pay an entry fee to play Stasis in a tournament where I got to register and play with Time Elementals.
Yeah.
End of your turn, pick up my Winter Orb.
Sure.
Or pick up my
That's
Stasis.
a good one.
or Stasis, either or. And, that's...
I mean, Time Elemental is a fine... You have to think back. Like, the good creatures at the time were like Sarah Angel. Shivan Dragon, right?
Ishan
the
Shade,
cards,
Autumn Willow.
Huge creatures that didn't do anything the turn they entered the battlefield.
Right.
And so if your opponent is going like a turn 3 Phyrexian Warbeast, turn 4 Balduvian Horde, Time Elemental's a house because it stands in front of the 3/4 and bounces the shade, and then it just dies, and your opponent's very 2-for-1 out of that combat.
Yeah, but I mean, its main its main job was literally just pick up Stasis. End of your turn, pick up Stasis, I untap, play it again, and then you hate me. But that's great. That's what it was for. That was the idea. It was so much fun. Aaron, what's number 8?
So my number 8 is a card that I think has a lot of potential. I'm one of those weirdos that tries to make commander decks with different color combinations. I try not to do the same one twice. And so, I've got my Sultai girl, I've got my Golgari girl, I've got my Mardu, and I was going over color combinations with my boyfriend over Valentine's dinner, because that's what you do when you're dating another Magic player. And I was like, what are some color combinations I haven't made yet? And he was like, you haven't done Boros. And I was like, yeah, but what else is there besides Feather? And he named this card, which is my number 8, and I love this, and there's something here. I don't know what it is, but I want to make a deck of this, and I will one day. My number 8 is Bel Vorka, Spectral Sergeant. So Bel Vorka is 2 colorless, a red and a white. It's a legendary creature, Spirit Soldier. Note the converted mana cost of each card as it's put into exile. Bel Vorka, Spectral Sergeant's power is equal to the greatest number noted for it this turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. It is an asterisk for power and 5 toughness. So I don't think I've ever seen the word note mentioned twice on one Magic card. And so this is so strange. You obviously want to be playing with a lot of things at exile, which, white can certainly do. Right. But it's not the typical Boros, like, get in there aggressive militia thing that we're used to. And also flavor-wise, Bel Vorka was a character in the Ravnica storyline. And so there's just something here where I was like, I'm not normally Boros, but you know what? I could get behind this.
They will not put the word note on anything that isn't a conspiracy card, a silver bordered card, or Ice Cauldron, because Ice Cauldron.
I mean, they did it for, I think Oubliette's original text had the word note.
Right, but this is talking about sort of modern day, current Oracle.
These days. Yeah.
It's Tanos' Coffin, and I think Ice Cauldron are the only actual black bordered, real quote-unquote tournament cards you can play with it.
This card is so cool. And finding design space for red-white that hasn't been tread over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
Especially for a commander, is very hard. And Bel Vorka does an amazing job utilizing both the red and the white love of the exile zone.
Right. This is the first, to me, like sort of the tip of the hand of Wizards is going to try to do as much with red and white that's not a bunch of dudes smashing at the same time.
Well, we've even seen that with the Showdown of the Skull. It's like, I have a friend that's playing with that in Vintage, and he just loves it.
That card is not fair. That card is
I had 2 of those in a limited deck the other day.
I saw that, and I was like, how dare you not get 7 wins? I would have jumped through the computer.
I had 15 lands, and the 2 of those were my only 4-drops, and that was my deck.
4 Battlefield Raptor. Get out of here.
I did have 4 Battlefield Raptor.
Get out of here. Swear to God. All right, my number 8 here. This is, to me, a classic creature at this point. Now, when it showed up, it wasn't so classic. When it showed up, it was like, oh my God, it does so much. It does everything. And back then, they don't really do it these days, but back then they used to give you those oversized foils, and finally they figured out no one liked them, so they don't do them anymore. But they used to. And so I had the giant foil of the Mimioplasma sitting on my desk for years, because that creature is dope. The Mimioplasma is a blue, green, black, and 2 generic mana for a 0/0 mythic legendary ooze. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile 2 creature cards from graveyards. If you do, it enters the battlefield as a copy of one of those cards with the number of additional +1/+1 counters on it equal to the power of the other card. So, yeah, it was.
Yep.
It's a smashing, stapling.
For a while there, Mimioplasma was really like the Sultai commander du jour. Like that was, if you wanted to play Sultai, that was the best thing you could be doing. And then they printed Muldrotha. And I remember when that new Vulrath got printed, which I'd mentioned earlier in the show, I think some people were like, well, it's really cute, but between Mimioplasma and Muldrotha, like the Sultai, you can just do so much better when Sultai. Right. And so, this was really
if you want to go a little cheaper.
Yeah. And so this one was, just kind of the OG that really put Sultai on the map. And, I have a lot of fond memories of this. And it's funny because my boyfriend even replied he indicated that we were like a Mimeoplasm one time. I'm not getting into it, but
that's very cute.
T-Rex.
Right.
So which of you now which of you is the T-Rex arm?
Right. Who's the T-Rex?
And which of you is the what's the other arm?
I don't know. Which the sort of scraggly scrawling. I don't know.
I would probably be that one.
Yeah.
I like the Mimioplasm for a couple of reasons. First of all, the German version of the Mimioplasm is Das Mimioplasma, which is hilarious to me. This creature is also like a combo card, interestingly. It's seen occasional play in Legacy because you can go get like a Lord of Extinction and a Triskelion.
Okay.
And your Lord of Extinction gives it a million +1/+1 counters, and then you just fire off a million Triskelion counters. And so, it's seen occasional play as like a reanimator target, as like a combo, it's like the new sutured ghoul for you old school full English breakfast folks.
This is one of those cards that if they were to, God forbid, ever make anything that looks remotely like a Revelark, this is one of the cards you have to think about. You go, oh, it's got 0 power, but can do really stupid things if I get into play for free. Got it.
We got Vesper Lark. We can bring this back with a Vesper Lark.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, God.
Let's move here to number 7. Ruben, Ruben, yours is high.
This one I'm a little surprised is actually higher on somebody's list. I thought that I would sneak in there with this number 7, but it is higher on somebody else's list.
Guess we'll see. Aaron, what you got?
So I'm going to stick around on red for a little while, and this is another attempt, I think, at Wizards giving red different things to do, giving red some built-in insurance as opposed to, just turning them sideways and then kind of falling apart to a board wipe. And so this is a card I really enjoyed during the Theros Beyond Death pre-release. This is a card that has seen play in Standard, and I would not hesitate to put in my deck in Commander either. My number 7 is Annex Hardened in the Forge. So Annex is 1 colorless and 2 red. He is a legendary enchantment creature demigod with an asterisk and 3 toughness. Annex's power is equal to your devotion to red, which was the case for all of the demigods, I believe, for their respective colors. And then whenever Annex or another non-token creature you control dies, you get a 1/1 red satyr creature token with this creature can't block. If the creature had power 4 or greater, you get 2 of these tokens instead. So there was a black-red sacrifice deck that was viable in Theros Beyond Death Limited. You had this in the Lampad, and so it was possible for you to just sort of feed things to the Lampad and you get satyrs, and so that was exactly my jam. That was what I played at the pre-release. But more importantly, in Standard, mono red just needed a bit of insurance because if they board wipe you, well, you're just sort of kind of dead on the board at that point. But you still have things to do. These creatures have haste, or no, they can't block. I'm sorry. And so this is just a really neat way to take red. And just having to 2-for-1 things, all of your removal spells just not really being as effective as they used to be.
Yeah, in Theros Beyond Death, Annex, Caliphate, and Renata, that'd be red, blue, and green, were all powered by their devotion, and Daxos and Timoret were toughness-based with their devotion.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're either star 3s or 2 stars.
That's right.
Okay.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It was a great, it was a super cool
like
cycle, yeah.
Very good cycle. Annex in particular, near and dear to my heart. It does a lot of what red needs to do. Like you go turn 1 Fervent Champion, turn 2 Robber of the Rich, then your opponent just plays an Infest or something, or just plays a bigger creature.
Yeah.
But Annex allows you to go bigger, right? It allows you to have some insurance against those Wrath style effects. Even if it's a Shatter the Sky, you're still getting a bunch of Satyr tokens.
Right.
And so it's a hugely important card to those decks.
And often, because of that Shadow of the Sky and Annex, you're drawing a card as well. So,
Right.
keeping you in the game is what this card does really, really well. And that's probably why I hate it. It's too good at that. It makes me angry.
It's very good at all the things that it does.
Right. I would just try to play some silly jank or whatever, and here comes Annex, turn 3.
Right.
Fine.
I'm looking at my hand of Heartless Acts and Wraths and stuff that doesn't exile, and I'm just well, crap.
It hurts. Well, thankfully we have Skyclave apparition these days. So
Sure. There you go.
Get out of here. Well, for my number 7, this was a card that, as you build the lists, we build the search, query, and we do the thing. And what I normally do is, I do the thing, and I write down all the ones that I like, and then later on I kind of put them where I want them to go and stuff. And this is one of those cards where I felt like I'd made my list, and I kind of went through it one more time just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And then I came on this card, and I was like, I can't. Even if we've talked about it a few times, even if we know how good this card is, we get to talk one more time about how dumb, crazy impactful. I swear I did not see this one coming. You can go back and watch anything I made around this time period when Shadows of Innistrad released. I was not talking about Thing in the Ice. I didn't see this one coming. I was like, what? And it's just crushed in Modern. It was absolutely ridiculous. Thing in the Ice is a blue and a generic mana for a 0/4 rare horror. It has Defender. It airs with 4 ice counters on it. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you remove an ice counter on it. And when you remove the last one, you transform it into the freakishly scary looking Awoken Horror. It is a rare Kraken Horror that is a 7/8. And when this creature transforms into it, you return all non-horror creatures to their owner's hands. Just like that.
And see, I was the opposite. When this card came out, out, I was one of those, Legacy Vintage Modern players that were like, there's something here, because it had all of the earmarks of, when you think of wanting to play lots of cheap instants and sorceries, you had Probe at the time, you had Manamorphose, you had all of these things, you had Ponder, Brainstorm. And so it was just a matter of what's going to be the right shelf for this. And I don't think it wasn't until, and you saw people trying it in like these Death Shadow type builds where you would play this and mutagenic growths. And that was a thing for like 2 weeks. But where it really took off, I think, was in those Phoenix decks, when that Arclight Phoenix came out, and this is what you could do, where you'd have your plan A or your plan B, whichever one was which. But, you had the ability to make this huge horror, or you had the ability to, get in there with a bunch of Phoenixes and go wide. And that's really where this card, I think, found its home.
Yeah,
which is super interesting to me, because usually you read this combination of words and you think Vintage Legacy. And then it doesn't really translate to Modern. Usually,
but
Delver
Probe,
doesn't really
I think
translate
the
to Modern.
problem was Legacy and Vintage at the time. I mean, obviously Vintage has changed to where Tarmogoyf is the number one creature right now. But, the problem, I think, was those formats don't typically run a lot of creatures, And so,
that's fair.
I think the flip just doesn't quite have the same impact. And also, the removal's better in those formats too, where I think in Modern, it's a lot of, oh God, here's this 7/8 something. Whereas in Legacy and Vintage, I feel like that's much easier to deal with.
Right.
And
Swords
so
and Plowshares versus, Path Exile,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
you're not losing that much. And
But I mean, it did find a home in Modern for sure.
That's one of the things I love about formats. It's just, finding out like Uro, the fact that Vintage has become largely immune to Uro. I wonder why that is. Like, why is it these cards just don't break through? But that's one thing I love about Magic is what card takes off in what deck and what format. I think that's fascinating. I could talk about that all day.
you remember Faithless Looting? You guys remember that card?
Too soon, Evan. Too soon.
That was a hell of a Magic card.
Man,
we got Modern Horizons 2 coming. I'm hoping for Careful Study.
That would be
which would be it's a fair Faithless.
Well, you have to
Looting,
understand that they have to change the names though. Remember how they gave us Cobble Therapist? So they might not give us like Careful Study. They might give us like Hit in the Books or something.
right? Hit the Books. Hit the Books is a nice name for a Magic
That's actually
card.
Or
really
something
nice,
like
man.
that, All Nighter. I don't know. Just-
Yeah, these are Wizards. You need to hire Aaron to name your Magic.
Pay attention.
I like these names. These are some
Homeschooling.
nice
I don't
names.
know.
Let's move on to number 6. Ruben, what's your number 6?
I'm living for these draw a card, discard a card names that Aaron's coming up with. My number 6 is a card that has been around just forever. Originally printed in Legends. They're up to $11.50 these days, which seems like a high number. But it is one of the very few Magic cards that is a card and a token. Because you can make a copy with Prosh, Sky Raider of Care. You can make a copy with Care Keep. Or you can just cast your own copy of Kobolds of Care Keep. 0 mana, 0/1. It's a red creature.
Yep, that's what it does. This is
the Cheerios creature.
This is the creature that got nothing but ridicule. I mean, when I first joined the game, when I first learned Magic back in '96 or whatever, this is the type of card they said, this is a joke. This is hilarious. These cards are trash. You're never going to play these in a million years. I don't know why they made them. They made them for this one card that's terrible. And then they stuck them in a box and they put them up and now they're $11-something. And okay, thanks. It's a thing.
Not even on the reserved list.
No, they can print them if they want.
They just,
Even the art style, if you look up Kobold, cards with Kobold in the name, 3 of these were done by Julie Barrow, it looks like. Right. And, you can tell that they don't appear to be taken too seriously either. Like, they look unfinished and comical and silly and like nothing you have to be scared of. Christopher Rush knocked it out of the park like he always does and gave you a gorgeous Kobold in Crookshank Kobolds. But I think you can tell even in just the artwork that these creatures were not meant to be taken seriously. And now, you cut to having Rogok in Commander that people love. And so, you can't really predict what people are going to resonate with or what's going to resonate with people like I think Kobolds did.
I mean, Kobolds historically as a fantasy monster are even weaker goblinoids than goblins, right?
Okay.
They
I
were
see.
always
Come on,
supposed
Monster
to
Manual.
be,
Yeah, do it.
Exactly. They were always supposed to be goofy and fun and things that took a small hit to kill, right? These were minions that were designed to die.
Yep.
And the life cycle of a kobold is like 11 days, right? Like they're like mayflies of the fantasy world. And you see that in the art for Kobolds of Carekeep, that these are not strong. They've got spindly arms. One of them's wearing a nightcap. One of them's wearing like a dainty dress. They're supposed to be goofy and stupid.
Well,
and
they got that part right.
I love using kobolds in D&D.
Sure.
Especially there's a monster called Kobold Inventor that when it attacks and hits, one of 8 random effects will happen.
Oh.
And the effects are like a skunk in the cage and a scorpion on a stick and basket of centipedes and like a bunch of random garbage that they just walk around with.
Oh my God. All right. Well,
they're so much fun.
They were just, I mean, yeah, this was one of those, like, it was an oddity. You know, it was like this weird, you could kind of laugh at it. You don't really know why they made it. Is that the rate that we wanted creatures anyway, as a 0 mana 0/1? I mean, okay. It took how long for Mimnite to show up? I mean, seriously.
Right. But also, because it cost 0, you were able to get decks like Cheerios.
Sure.
Which was named after having 0 mana cost.
Right.
You'd play all the kobolds. You would play Glimpse of Nature or Enduring Renewal and Goblin Bombardment, and you'd just go to town.
Yeah, go crazy. All right, let's move on here to Aaron, number 6. What do you got?
My number 6 is an all-star in my She-Ray EDH deck because it has power less than 1, and it has a neat ETB ability that you can abuse again and again. My number 6 is Weaponcraft Enthusiast. So Weaponcraft Enthusiast is 2 colorless and a black. It was printed in Kaladesh. It is an Aetherborn Artificier with 0 power and 1 toughness, and it simply has Fabricate 2. And so when it enters the battlefield, you can either put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, or you can create 2 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature tokens. You can go big or you can go wide. And when you're playing She-Ray, you know, the way that She-Ray works is you want to sacrifice this somehow, and then it'll come back ideally at every end step if you're good at this. And then you just keep making servos and you keep doing this. And so this can get really, really ridiculous after a while. And I love it.
It's a very useful creature. Man. It's kind of does what you want to do in those kinds of decks.
And it was very good in Kaladesh Draft and Kaladesh Remastered Draft.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, both options are fine. The +1/+1 counters were relevant in some of the archetypes. The servos were relevant in some of the archetypes. You could do interesting bounce tricks with it, like bounce, Aether Trade wins it back to your hand, get more servos.
Right.
It was just it's just a really solid creature.
Yeah, this is one of those cards, like, it just kind of has the right numbers. It's a 3 mana 2/3, but it's also a 3 mana 0/1 that makes 2 1/1s, and you can do all sorts of cool tricks with that. That's really sweet.
If you want to sacrifice, if you have sacrifice triggers, you have 3 permanents.
Absolutely.
If you have +1/+1 counter things that are relevant, like what was that? Like Artification module or the modules from Kaladesh Draft. Then you have that. It does everything you really want at a solid rate without breaking anything.
Oh, if you want everything that you really want at a solid rate, my number 6. Let me tell you.
Look at that segue.
Right. Just taking it in there. So good. We've talked about this card before. It's not going to be the biggest surprise in the world, but it's also one of those cards that I can't look at myself in the mirror and not put Jace Vryn's Prodigy on a list of the best 0 power creatures. Jesus.
You know, we must have been looking at so sometimes Evan will give us like a Scryfall link with which to search. And, you know, I'm feeling a little dumb because these cards were not on my list that you guys gave me. So I don't know what Scryfall link you gave me, but
Jace was another one that I was like, it's been on a lot of my lists.
It's been a lot.
And
I'm gonna have to not use your search links
insane.
anymore because I would have put this card on my list.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'll put it in your stead, okay? So Jace Vryn's Prodigy is a blue and generic mana for an 0/2 mythic legendary human wizard. You know, tuck in, kids. It's going to be a minute. We got a lot of words.
Yeah.
Tap, draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 5 or more cards in your graveyard, you exile it and return him transformed under its owner's control. On the other side is Jace Telepath Unbound, a planeswalker with 5 starting loyalty, because that's fair. +1, up to 1 target creature gets -2, -0 until your next turn. -3, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that card will be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. And -9, you get an emblem with quote, whenever you cast a spell, target opponent puts the top 5 cards of their library into their graveyard. Nothing about this was fair. This took LSV, and no one thought it was that great until LSV called it the best blue card in the set, if not the best card in the set. Everyone lost their minds, and it became a tournament staple that won infinite. It was ridiculous. Still worth $18.
There's a reason why you look at decks that you would think wouldn't want this effect.
Right.
But it's so good that it made its way into Esper Dragons, right? It made its way into decks that had red Anger of the Gods style effects.
Right.
Because the value is just so big. I mean, everybody loves a Merfolk Looter.
Yeah.
Adam Prozac is famous for saying, "I would rather draw a card and discard a card than draw a card."
Sure.
And this card gave you value for that. Also, keep in mind, this was in a standard that had fetch lands. And so it was very easy to fill up your graveyard relatively quickly. So you could get to 4 cards in your graveyard, block with your Jace and flip it before they could deal damage, or wait till the end step.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, so this was like a lot of powerful cards, you can either try to break it and you can just, go ham and play Goryo's Vengeance and things like that, or, you can just play fair Magic. And so either way you slice it, this card was good. And, I remember I played Esper Dragons in Standard when this was good. And I remember just $60, $80, how high is it going to go? And I think this was one of the most expensive Standard cards we'd seen in a while. That whole Standard was expensive, but the Jaces in particular, you needed 4 of them. And
they got to $100 or something. Like it was.
I think really at one point.
It was
I think
crazy.
That in terms of cards that I'd bought, I bought my Jaces at $25 a piece, and I was like $100 for 4 singles. I think for a very long time that was the most I'd ever paid for a playset of a Magic card for a Standard card.
Wow.
I was like, this is a high watermark for me. Not since I was buying Rishodon ports for $20 a piece when I was 13. Did I spend this much on a Magic card for Standard? And of course, now that's, we look back and we chuckle and laugh and cry a little.
This card was just bananas, and it's
good.
only $18 these days. But like, this card is silly, and if it were to ever get anywhere close to a Standard format again, I assure you it would be at the top of the list.
And I love Magic Origins from a story perspective, because we'd always gotten these planeswalkers as like incidental story pieces of like, oh, we're going to Kaladesh. There's, the Artificer's Fair, and there's this other stuff happening. And oh, by the way, there's some planeswalkers.
Right.
And then we go to Kaldheim. It's like there's gods and Vikings, and the elves are having trouble, and the shapeshifters are at war. And oh, by the way, there's some planeswalkers.
Right.
Origins put the planeswalkers front and center. And the story was about them, and told the story of Chandra's origin and Jace's origin and Liliana's origin, and these 5 flip planeswalkers told those stories in a game mechanics way, which I love.
Oh yeah, it was so cool. The flavor in each of them was terrific, and Liliana's story and how she flipped based on something dying because it was her brother and all this other stuff. Absolutely terrific. Did a great job there. So let's move on here to our top 5. Ruben, what's your number 5?
All right. My number 5 is a card I have never cast. I've never seen cast. It costs $257.99 because it's part of the reserved list, and it's named Singing Tree.
Oh.
Singing Tree is 3 colorless and a green for an 0/3 plant, illustrated by Rob Alexander, and it's part of the reserved list. Tap, target attacking creature has base power 0 until the end of the turn. I don't think this was ever good.
No.
This was never competitive in any way, shape, or form.
Not once. Not ever.
But it was from Arabian Nights, and it was a rare.
This is this is the exact kind of card that was in just random binders for years and years and years, and it was untradeable trash that no one would ever touch ever. And there's a reason it's $260 because a lot of people just didn't care about it. No one took really good care of them and whatnot. And so here you are. Thanks, reserve list.
This is something that I would like. I would play this in a commander deck if it wasn't $257. Like, it has the earmark plant tree, surprise fog effect kind of like. I like this.
I assure you, in 1996, no one liked this. It was sad. Aaron, what's number 5?
So we talked a little bit earlier about shapeshifters, between Vulrath Shapeshifter and Clever Impersonator, and, the limitations of shapeshifters, that normally you can only copy creatures that are in play, but Vulrath Shapeshifter lets you discard things, and you can keep doing that to kind of customize what you want and keep changing. And Clever Impersonator really threw out the book in terms of being able to copy anything that wasn't a land. And so this is another card that kind of threw the book out again with being able to copy something specifically in your graveyard. My number 5 is Body Double. So Body Double is 4 colorless and a blue. It's a creature shapeshifter originally printed in Planar Chaos. 0 power, 0 toughness. You may have Body Double enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature, any creature in a graveyard. And so this was a big part of the Protean Hulk decks. People really love to win with that convoluted combo of Protean Hulk and Revelark and Body Double and Mog Fanatic and tying that whole room together. And just when I look at this card, that's just immediately what I think of. But both fantastic arts, the original done by Steve Prescott, the remake done by Winona Nelson. And I just love this card, but I know nothing good ever comes from it.
Oh yeah, this is nothing like awesome. Usually you say, okay, it's a Body Double combo, let me get a piece of paper,
Exactly. Body Double is the centerpiece of so many 4-card combos. Yeah.
Yes, between Body Double and Revelark, it got really gross and standard for a little while, let me tell you.
Right. The standard combo was the standard 4-card combo, as opposed to the legacy or extended 4-card combo, was Body Double Revelark, Mirror Entity Venser, or Mirror Entity Aven Rift Watcher to gain infinite life.
Right.
And the way it would work is you would have like the requisite cards in play or in your graveyard, and then you'd put 1 million copies of Mirror Entity's ability on the stack, and then Body Double would be a Revelark. It would die. It would bring 2 things back, and then you would bounce something with Venser or gain 2 life. Then you would trigger again. It would have no toughness. Die, come back, die, come back, die, come back. And then they'd have no permanence in play, and you'd have infinite life.
Right, and then you draw a little X,
which
and
is very
an arrow, a little loopy doop, and that's exactly how it worked. Well, my number 5 here is a very much a classic Magic card at this point. Hilariously, in many ways, Wizards decided to make a secret lair version and then banned it before they shipped it. Walking Ballista is my number 5. Walking Ballista, which did show up in I believe the Box of Rocks was what that one was called. Something like that. Walking Ballista is X mana, X generic for a 0/0 rare artifact creature construct. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. For 4 generic mana, you can put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you remove a +1/+1 counter from it to deal 1 damage to any target. That's how
Just when you think they've found enough ways to exhaust this card, something else comes out. So now the new hotness is Heliod Suncrowned and Walking Ballista, because you give it lifelink and then you just sort of go nuts. And so I remember when this card came out, the weekend immediately after, there was a vintage challenge, and Shops won the vintage challenge. I mean, and so for a card to be so powerful that it rockets to the top of the most powerful formats overnight and stays there, this is enough to replace Triskelion. Triskelion was a thing for a while, and no one talks about that card anymore because you have Walking Ballista. And so, you have the post decks in Legacy, you have the Shops decks in Vintage. Modern has always had uses for this, whether it just be Affinity or whether it be, like Lantern or Tron or whatever. And just when you think it's enough, some other card comes out, and then people are like, wait a minute, this is a thing.
Okay, I can connect to the youth here, right? Okay. Right. First of all, calling them the youth. Secondly, Walking Ballista's impact is like that song Driver's License, where it was like, I know who is this person and what happened, and they literally, the brand new song debuted at number 1 on the charts. That's what happened with Walking Ballista.
And again, one of those cards that you don't even have to try to break. Like, yeah, you can do Heliod things, and yeah, you can pair with Arcbound Ravager, but I seem to recall in Standard, you just paid mana for it. Like, it just was something that, if you didn't deal with it, you could use it right away as just a blocker and maybe a way to ping something, or, you could drop it in the late game and just watch it take over games. And so, again, that says so much about the power level of a card when you don't even have to try. Like, just play fair. Hangerback Walker was another one where it's like, yeah, you can sacrifice it and make a bunch of Thopters, or just play Magic. That's what you gotta do.
It feels like, there might have been a reality many, many years before this card showed up, where it was 4 generic mana tap, put a counter on it. Not just 4 mana, many as you want. And glad we don't live in that world.
I didn't know that this song existed.
Oh,
where have you been?
It literally.
Music.
No, it's
okay.
Don't
listen
I
to
totally
music.
understand. It's totally okay, Ruben. I randomly listened to it one day and I was like, "What is this weird?" It is like the number 1 song everywhere. It blew up in a million different ways. I've never seen anything like it. It's not that it's a. It's not.
It broke a record for most single-day streams for a non-holiday song.
Yeah,
apparently.
And it's not that it's like the greatest song in the world. It's just like it's sort of a topical song. It's kind of a sad song. We're in the middle of a pandemic.
It's resonant. Like no matter who you are, you can listen to the song and think of a moment like this. Sure. Like to know what it's like to be young.
Walking Ballista.
Just like Walking Ballista, everybody. Move on here to our number 4. Ruben, what's number 4?
My number 4 is a card that has a long and illustrious history. It's been printed 21 different printings, the first of which was way back in Antiquities. But perhaps the most indelible, most famous version was printed in Mirrodin, because regardless of the century, the plane, or the species, developing artificers never fail to invent the Ornithopter.
That's right.
Ornithopter is a 0-mana 0/2 artifact creature Thopter with flying. This, of course, was a huge hit in the affinity decks of the time, either standard, block, extended, modern, not to mention decks like Tempered Steel and Fauna Quest. Remember Fauna Quest with Quest for the search your library for an equipment and attach it to something? Yeah, wow. I mean, people love Ornithopter.
Card is great. This was on my list, 100% on my list. I moved it off for various reasons, but like you can't deny also that it's just like one of those iconic cards. Like it's a man 0/2 flyer. It's kind of what it does. This is where like when people were showing me like my first Magic cards back in the day, I was like, wait a minute, Ornithopter is an 0-mana 0/2 flyer. The Kobold is 0/0. What? Why isn't this at least 2 toughness
he
or
said
something?
the Kobold.
Kobold.
The Kobold and the Beautiful. I love that.
There you go.
Kobold.
My mom watched that for years.
The Ornithopter is such a, and also let's not forget turning the Ornithopter into a big old pair of scissors.
That's right, giant scissors, please.
Almost winning a
even
Pro
just
Tour.
Regular affinity. Like just, you know, you would sneeze that card out, that would turn on your Mox Opals, and then, you know, you'd strap a cranial plating on that thing, or you would do the Ravager thing, and suddenly it's a viable threat. Yeah.
I mean, it's you want it for your cranial platings, you want it for your Arcbound Ravagers, you want it for your Frogmites, you want it for your everything, really, when you have an Ornithopter.
And can we just say how much I miss Modern Affinity? Like, I think Modern was at its best when Affinity was legal. And
I agree.
Affinity
I like Modern when Affinity is good.
Yep.
That makes sense, sure. All right, so let's move on here to Aaron's number 4. What you got?
So my number 4 is a card that I would not have predicted would have been great in Standard, but, you know, when some of the most broken cards out nowadays have to do with lands, this card does increase in value. And even sees play in Modern. You know, these people still want to be playing these Omnath, you know, they wanted to play Uro Soup decks for a while, or even just Titan Shift decks. You know, the Titan decks just they'll find any way that they can possibly ramp, and this card certainly helps. They can't even do it with a straight face. My number 4 is Arboreal Grazer. So Arboreal Grazer is 1 green. It was printed in War of the Spark, 0 power, 3 toughness. It's a creature beast with reach. When Arboreal Grazer enters the battlefield, you put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped.
This was my number 7. I was shocked that somebody had this higher.
I did not really see this card coming either. This is one of those cards where I was like, this is like weird, limited, whatever. And
he's playing at least 2 formats, like Standard and Modern. I think it even saw play in Pioneer at one point because of the various. Yeah, so this card, like.
Oh, I know. I couldn't believe it either. I was like,
and
what?
03, why does the monkey have a butt that big? Like, what?
Right.
Why you got a butt shame? What's up with that?
Why is it an 03
Jeez.
is the other thing. Why doesn't it have Defender? Why is it an 03?
Why does it have reach?
But more importantly, like, I didn't see this card coming. The first couple weeks of Limited, people were like, don't play Arboreal Grazer in your Limited decks. And I was like, okay.
Makes sense.
And then it's just like the best thing you can be doing in Standard? Are you kidding?
Yeah. It just like, okay, like 2 Arboreal Grazer moment in hand. I'm feeling good about that for some reason. It was really weird.
Yeah.
But that's
and
what they did.
as Aaron mentioned, it's a multi-format all-star now.
Yeah.
Like, what in look at God is what they say.
Because we don't know why.
Grazer is, I mean...
Sometimes those are the right numbers.
It's got famous friends. It's got, you know, when you're alongside Uro and Field of the Dead, you don't need to do much.
Right. I mean, when literally you could power out turn 2 Oko because Grazer existed, like that was serious.
And block.
Yeah, and block. That was serious business. So that said, let's move on here to my number 4. This card is if not multi-format all-star, certainly the format, the standard in which it existed, and it is an absolute all-star in Commander. This card also showed up most recently in Jumpstart, and I had a fantastic time playing with this card on Magic Arena, both in Jumpstart and in Historic, which is awesome because who does not love a Blood Artist? Blood Artist is black and a generic mana for an 0/1 uncommon vampire, and it says whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, that's any of them, that's yours, that's theirs, that's anybody. Target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. There are so many wonderful situations where you set up and you go, can't lose. No matter what you're doing, I'm just going to sack all the minutes and speed and you die. I'm going to block everything and you die. I'm going to attack all out, and if you block, you die. It's just incredible because that's what Blood Artist does.
And they've given us variations of this throughout the years. You know, they gave us Zulaport Cutthroat, and there's been some, Bastion of Remembrance, Falcon Wrath Noble, but this is really the OG. Like, I don't think we're going to get it as good as this again. And, really just set the tone for Aristocrats decks. This is what you want to be doing. And if there's going to be an Aristocrats deck in your format, you better have this type of effect because it just changes the game.
They just forgot those very specific words whenever another of your creatures dies or whatever. Another, not any creature, but then they said, no, just leave it that way. And oh my God, it's insane.
Yeah, and it just changes the game in terms of, it should be so easy. You see your opponent with a board full of creatures and all you think is, I just need a board wipe. I just need a kill spell. And this changes things. You really have to evaluate, if I board wipe, I could just die. Is it even worth me doing this, or do I just try to find some way to get out of this? And, also the iconic art by Johann Voss. It took me forever to realize that he was using blood and that there was actually somebody hanging from the ceiling or from the wall that he was painting. And so, the angle of this is really impressive. The way the blood looks, the victim, the art. I mean, just gorgeous card. Johann Voss knocked this out of the park.
The thing that they're hanging from is called a gibbet.
Oh, okay.
Medieval torture device.
Wow, you are just hitting it on the park.
You might have mentioned that before, but I actually had never noticed that person in the far back left. Wow.
Yeah.
Rip. Press F to pay respect. Yeah. This was my number 9.
Nice.
And I gotta be honest with you. I had Blood Artist and Arboreal Grazer higher on other lists. I thought for sure Blood Artist would be higher on Aaron's list.
Well, I'd picked Blood Artist before. That was kind of the Noble Hierarch problem.
Okay,
where it was
I
felt like I'd kind of ran it into the ground, and people were like, we know, Aaron, you love a Blood Artist. And so
I'll tell you a format that I love Blood Artist in the most, and that's Cube. When Mardu Aristocrats was allowed to be a thing in Cube, it was bad, but it was what I drafted every time, and I was like, ooh, I got a Goblin Bombardment. We did it, folks. And I'm just ooh, look at this. I got me a Lingering Souls. Look how powerful I am.
Oh my God.
And it never won anything. But I love a Blood Artist.
But it was fun though. That's important. Let's move on here to our top 3. Aaron, what's your number 3?
I love Dredge. I love Enchantress. I love being left alone. One of the things I loved the most about playing Modern Ad Nauseam was throwing up a Leyline of Sanctity and just saying, just leave me alone. Like, just don't look at me. Don't touch me. I'm here to do something and I want to do what I came to do. And no card exemplifies this more than my number 3, which is Xanted Swarm. So Xanted Swarm is 1 green. It was originally printed in Scourge. It is a creature type instant with 0 power and 1 toughness with flying. Whenever Xanted Swarm attacks, reminder, it has 0 power. Defending player can't play spells this turn. And so this was a really popular sideboard option in Storm decks in Legacy. You would splash green for this because if people see that you're playing Storm where you're not running any creatures, they're probably boarding out a lot of their removal. And so, you play a Xanted Swarm and you can kill a Xanted Swarm, but you're probably spending resources to deal with the Xanted Swarm where your opponent's just assembling the resources to be able to combo off. And so this is a really great way to have your opponent leave you alone so that you can do what you came to do. And I love just the design of it. I love that it has 0 power, that you feel it's like fixing a toaster with a sledgehammer. We were like, I have to deal with this thing, but am I really burning a Force of Will and a blue card on a okay, I guess I am. And just the way that it feels so disadvantageous to deal with it. I love what it does. I love the decks that it goes in. It's just great.
I love that you're playing in a format with like rocket launchers, and spaceships level of power, and you go, I can't beat that bug. I can't. Nope. That bug will stop everything I'm trying to do.
And the flavor text, the flavor text really, sometimes the flavor text, because when you first look at this, you're like, how is a bug able to do this? Like, you don't really get it. And then they say when they land on you, all you can do is think about tearing them off. And it just ties the room together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Xanted Swarm was very close to my list. I mean, any combo deck that wants to be left alone off the stack, you play a Xanted Swarm. Like, it's seen sideboard play in Storm, Belcher, Show and Tell, Hulk, any of that kind of stuff. A Xanted Swarm is great especially because the decks that you're playing against, you're sideboarding it in, they're sideboarding out all of their removal.
Yep.
They're sideboarding out their Swords to Plowshares and their Lightning Bolts against your Belcher deck. So you play a Xanted Swarm, and all of their answers are over there in the deck box.
And now you just play Veil of Summer, so this card really doesn't see too much play anymore, but it had a good run.
It's fine. Until they replaced it with something crazily dumb, overpowered. It's fine.
And you would probably still play Xanted Swarm in one land Belcher, right?
Well,
because you want to be able to untap and not have to use the extra mana. Maybe.
I appreciate the political nature of this card as well in a multiplayer environment where you're like, you don't get to play spells this turn. Mr. Counterspell over there. Everyone see what's going to resolve the rest of this turn, eh? You know, that's something you can do.
I had not considered Xanted Swarm in Commander.
Something you can do.
I mean, it's cheap enough. It's less than $1.
I know, right?
It's true.
Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a card that I love on a deep and personal level, but it's also emblematic of a creature type, and that creature type is Crab. There are a lot of crabs that have 0 power, most notable of which are the Hedron and Ruin crab that exist just to make me mad and angry. There's also Iceberg Cantrix, which does something very similar and mills you or mills your opponent. But I want to talk about Karlis, the Raging Isle, because it makes me so happy. I just love like reading this
you
card.
You love big butts, Ruben.
I do love big butts. I cannot lie. Yeah. Karlis, the Raging Isle, is 2 colorless and a blue for a legendary creature, Leviathan Crab. Shout out to Leviathans in my top 10 list. It's a 0/17.
God.
Just because I love it. Spells your opponent's cast to target Karlis, the Raging Isle, costs 2 more to cast, so it kind of protects itself with its, outside, with its chitinous form. Pay 3 colorless. Karlis gets +X/-X till end of turn, where X is the number of islands you control. So it can attack and become like a 4/13, maybe? Yeah. It's like, let's get in there. Activate it twice if you're feeling spicy to make it an 8/7 or an 8/9. I just think this card's hilarious and adorable, and I love it.
I agree with hilarious and adorable. I think this is one of those cards that, like, I feel like you run into things like, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't have trample. Like, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't have any kind of other sort of evasion. And it's a cute Commander card. I mean, they made a special version for the bundle, which was really cool. A cute little promo for that. And as far as I can tell, they make this thing look as cute as possible.
And it's got a whole world on its back.
You can get that full art with the fancy borderless frame for 42 cents. I mean, and if I remember correctly, they snuck this in at the end of the preview cycle too. So people were already losing their mind about Zendikar Rising for various reasons. And then they were like, oh, here's an 0/17 crab. And the audience just lost their minds of like, what?
Right. There's only so many power toughness, numbers that have not been done before. And 0/17 has definitely not been done before.
Yeah. And I think that the name was a reference to a specific Greek myth. But I can't recall which one off the top of my head. I also think it might be Charybdis of the Scylla and Charybdis fame from Jason and the Argonauts. But I think that was like a worm of
Charybdis
some kind,
or Charybdat?
Crab.
No?
Well, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which Charib? Charybdis.
So for my number 3 here, this is, you could call it basic, I think, in many ways. My top 3, you could call that if you wanted to. You have to respect a card that we've certainly brought up, before. We've talked about it before. It's fine. You just can't imagine. And when you read the story, because Wizards, I mean, in many good ways, has no shame when it comes to the R&D tales of how things went wrong. When they're like, why did Umezawa's Jitte do what it did? Well, because we had this mana ability and it made everything weird. Well, when they said somebody at R&D was like, you know what? After Darksteel had been shipped off, its final card layout, whatever, had been sent to the printer, someone said, I should try that Arcbound Ravager card in Affinity. And then everything broke.
Yeah.
And it's just remarkable how unbelievably crazy, stupidly powerful that card was. Like, to leave Magic around Stronghold when I did, around Exodus, and then come back and see this thing and damage on the stack, and what in the world are you doing with all these counters? And this card is just not remotely fair. Arcbound Ravager is 2 generic mana for a rare artifact creature beast. It's a 0/0. It's a sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it has modular 1, which means this enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever it dies, you may put its +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature. It's just dumb.
Another one of those cards that's like Walking Ballista, which it goes great with, and that just when you think you found all the uses for Arcbound Ravager, something else comes up, where it's like, Arcbound Ravager had been doing its thing in Affinity for a while, and all of a sudden Hardened Scales came out, and Hardened Scales had been out for a while, and then the light bulb kind of went off, and people were like, wait a minute, we can and then people started playing like Artbound Worker and silly things like that. And, you started seeing the crazy combat math that went into Arcbound Ravager plus Hardened Scales. And then suddenly Hardened Scales is a $5 card. And, I have no doubt that we're going to continue seeing things where the light bulb's going to go off and people are going to go, Arcbound Ravager. My most painful moment with Ravager is when I first started playing Modern. My first Modern deck was Living End. And I'll never forget the first time I played Modern Affinity, I thought I was a bad bitch. And I was playing Living End and I go off at my Living End and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to wipe your whole board. Yeah, you're going to like that. And then they go in response, sacrifice to Arcbound Ravager, sacrifice to Arcbound Ravager. And I'm like, what? No.
No, stop it. No, you're not supposed
and
to do
then
that.
all their artifacts are in the graveyard, and then the Living End goes off, and then whoop, everything comes back, and I've done nothing.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's horrifying. That's how that works. I feel like oftentimes there are standard formats that come and go, and there are decks in those formats that no one has ever found. No one ever bothered. Just like that Kethis combo thing that we had there for 5 minutes. Yep. I just feel like that's one of those decks that, someone had to kind of unearth it. And during the time of Arcbound Ravager, I can only imagine the myriad of cool decks that no one ever got to play because this was just the best thing for years.
It was too oppressive.
God.
Yeah, I mean, it did win a Pro Tour, obviously, in the hands of Pierre Canali.
Of course.
The famous Ham Sandwich Pro Tour.
True.
And it's won every format that it's ever been in.
Yep.
From block until vintage, it's been good in one way, shape, or form. And
Wow.
It was, of course, in Can You Feel with a Heart of Steel Secret Lair with the previously aforementioned Walking Ballista and Dark Steel Colossus.
Hey-o, that's a big boy.
I will say, though, I did get my revenge, because sometimes you'd find an Affinity player that wouldn't know the deal, so they would just take their Living End, and you'd kind of chuckle, and then you'd also get the people, because people forget that Living End is a May, so there were so many times where you'd put Living End on the stack, and your Affinity player would overcompensate and be like, get rid of everything, and you're like, I'm not going to cast it.
Oh, that's so sick! That I did not know. That is incredible. You're like, okay, it doesn't happen. You're like, what? That's not in the rules. You can't do that. Yeah. That's incredible.
That's the old stare down. What's it called when two cars are like coming at each other?
Playing chicken
first.
Yeah,
playing chicken. Yeah.
Moving here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2. We are now to a point where I'm like, all right, I haven't talked about Spellskite in a while, so I'm going to talk about Spellskite. Spellskite's ridiculous, and it needs to be mentioned on the 0 power list because it's so unique.
Yeah,
Spellskite is 2 colorless mana or 2 generic mana for an 0/4 artifact creature horror, originally from New Phyrexia. It's been reprinted enough now that you can get your copies for $3-4.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Pay a Phyrexian blue mana, which can either be played with a blue mana or 2 life, change the target of target spell or ability to Spellskite. This card has seen play in main decks from Urza to Vannifar, a bunch of
even
Commander
Lantern
decks.
Control.
Lantern Control, it's a great one, but even more, it's seen play in sideboards.
Yeah.
And not just in artifact-centric sideboards like Affinity. You play this in, like, Merfolk sideboards. You play this in basically anything where if the format has Infect in it, if the format has Slippery Bogle in it, you want to have access to a Spellskite.
Oh, yeah. I remember when I was first learning how to play Ad Nauseam, and maybe, Ruben, you can remember this too. The first primer I ever saw, one of the best primers was on MTG Salvation. Remember Salvation? And there was actually a section there that talked about how to beat certain cards because, Ad Nauseam is a deck that can often fold to itself. And so it's like, well, what do I do if my opponent has like 36 life? And it's like, okay, here's the way you get around that. And then it's like, what do you do if your opponent has Spellskite? And it's like, all right, basically what you have to do is you have to have enough lands to keep aiming it back at them and make them pay 2 life every time to where they can't afford to pay the life anymore. And then finally the lightning storm resolves. And I just remember having to practice that because a lot of times people would play the Spellskite and figure you would scoop. And it's like, nope, I have a way around this. I just have to remember how to do it.
Wow. Yeah, this is one of those cards that there's not a lot of fair Phyrexian mana cards, okay? There's very, very few of them. I would argue this is one of the fairest cards in that it's powerful, it's exciting, it's cool, it's very useful, but it's not overpowering. It's just,
I agree with you.
You know,
it's so unique. Nothing else comes close to what Spellskite does.
Exactly. And this is you don't have to be playing blue for this to be awesome, and that's okay. And I just, I don't like a lot of Phyrexian mana cards, but I really, really like Spellskite. Always enjoyed this card. All right. Aaron, what's number 2?
So we named a couple cards that Xanted Swarm is particularly good in, and this is another card that sees play sometimes with Xanted Swarm. I don't really play walls in many formats, but this is one wall I'm always happy to see, and just nothing really good comes with this. My number 2 is Tinderwall. So Tinderwall is 1 green. It is originally printed in Ice Age. It is a plant wall, 0 power, 3 toughness with Defender. You can sacrifice Tinderwall to make 2 red mana to your mana pool, or add 2 red mana. And you can also pay 1 red and sacrifice it, and Tinderwall deals 2 damage to target creature it's blocking. So I played 1 land Spy in Pauper for a little while, and we ran this card as well because it is a common. But most famously, it's seen in Belcher. So if you played Belcher in Legacy or even Vintage, this is what you wanted to be doing as a way to, get your storm count going, or just as a way to get the mana that you need so that you can drop your Belcher and win the game. And so I have a lot of fond memories of this. Belcher was my first Legacy deck, and I just see this card, and I'm just like, who could have predicted? When they were making Ice Age, did they ever dream that it would become like the backbone of combo decks?
No, not even a little bit. This was the other half of Goblin Lumberjacks or whatever.
Okay.
Something like that.
Like that, where they made more green mana and this one made red mana or whatever. Right. It was very cute, but no one really got it at the time. Everyone's just like, this card sucks.
And also nobody ever, that last ability distracted everybody and was like, I don't understand what this card needs to do. Fortunately, someone figured out, it's just Dark Ritual.
In green.
And that helped. Yeah. Because you can play it and then untap your land the next turn if you want to, and you can end up with more mana, which is a huge deal.
Right. These days, if this type of card had, were to come out, first of all, we'd be like, what the hell are they doing? Second, we'd be like, oh my God, this is a ritual type, effect. But back in the day, we didn't really care or respect ritual abilities at all. Like, it was a different time. It was a different time. Nevinyrral's Disc was like the king stuff of the day.
They've completely moved away from this effect.
Totally.
And from rituals in general.
Right.
They would never reprint.
Well, now they give you, we did get that Ironcrag feat where it's like, they'll give you like 7 mana, but it's like, you can cast exactly 1 spell from this. Or I think there was another one that was like, we'll give you the mana, but it's specifically for like creatures or something. So there's catches now. And so they're trying really hard not to break anything.
The Omen Paths, I think it was.
Sure.
The one
that's
2 red and 2 white or whatever.
There's a couple that are like that. Also, that one costs 3 mana. They aren't giving us 1 mana rituals anymore.
Right.
But yeah, Tinderwall it's so innocuous but so impactful.
Man, well, when you want to talk about innocuous and impactful, you want to talk about like living at the top of the metagame from the moment it saw print. Wizards 100% wanted this to be a great card, and by God, they got there. I was a little sick of this card by the time it finally rotated out of standard. I just, there's only so many times you can get someone almost to death and then they go Hydroid Krasis for 6 or whatever, and you just hate life and everything related to it. Hydroid Krasis is a blue, a green, and X generic mana for a 0/0 mythic jellyfish Hydra beast. When you cast this spell, you gain half X life and draw half X cards rounded down. It has Flample, which is flying and trample. And when it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So it's a giant monster that gains you life and draws you cards, and that's what we need in our mythic monsters these days.
This really felt like the start of the Simic supremacy in Standard. This was the card that really made you feel like blue and green is what they wanted you to be playing. And then you had Growth Spiral, and then you had Uro, and then you had Oko, and it's just been, Simic season from then on. And so, and also the Simic, they kind of lost their minds with Simic for a little bit, when it feels like they just kind of had this dartboard board, and they just started throwing it. It's like, okay, we got a human beast ooze with like flanking Bushido and Rampage, like go. And like, it just felt like everything just felt so random and tacked on somehow, which I guess is Simic, but yeah, they really did.
Simic, you know,
Right.
They really did lose their minds a little bit with blue-green in these last couple sets.
Yeah, it got a little silly, essentially. And
yeah, Hydroid Krasis, you looked at it and immediately you wanted to compare it to Sphinx's Revelation, and you wanted to compare it to Sphinx's Revelation unfavorably, because you only gained half.
Right.
This is going to be a lot of mana in order for it to be anything relevant.
A lot of work.
Guess what? We have a lot of mana. And so this was like the best possible top deck at any, once you have 6 lands in play, 8 lands in play, 10 lands in play, which during those formats you did.
easily.
You had Nissa.
You wanted
Nissa who
this.
shakes the world.
God,
Yeah.
Nissa.
Doubling all your mana for sure.
That was gross. Because Hydro Krasis would do the same thing that Sphinx's Revelation did. It would draw another one. And so you would Krasis for whatever, and then you would Krasis for a bigger one. And it's like, oh my God, you're chaining these monsters together, and they're just burying me in card advantage. It's crazy.
Yeah. And catching you back up on life total, which, people, Sphinx's Revelation, your opponent died because of the card draw, but you survived because of the life gain.
Exactly. Yeah.
Going from 3 to 8 against a red deck, the 10-10 is going to help.
Yeah.
But you were going to die if the Krasis didn't gain you life.
Another one of those cards that you don't have to go hard on. You can make just like a 4/4 Krasis or a 3/3 Krasis, and that alone can change the tides for you, which says something about
I've played a 2/2 Krasis plenty of times.
I'm proud to say I've played a 2/2 Krasis a number of times.
Gain life, draw a card, say go. I mean, worst
and
options.
I love that the tech for this was Claim the Firstborn, because you could be like, whoop.
Well, that's a nice big Krasis. That's a fun. Let's bring it over here, please.
Shout out to mana values or converted mana costs or whatever you call them.
Right.
Yes, it is very low, as it should be. Let's move on here to our number 1. Aaron, what's your number 1?
So because my list was a little skewed, I didn't get the best Scryfall link. I had to get a little colorful with my number 1, but I don't hate it. I obviously have a great appreciation for older cards. I'm a firm believer in you can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And as far back as I can remember, this is just one of the oldest cases of a 0 power card just doing something so unusual and so fun. And another one of those cards that we'll just never see again, even though it looks particularly harmless. Like, I don't think there'd be a problem with putting this in standard, but I am sure that I'm missing something. My number 1 is Will o' the Wisp. Will o' the Wisp was printed in alpha for 1 black. You can get a summon Will o' the Wisp, and it's very simple. 0 power, 1 toughness, flying, and you pay 1 black and regenerate. So that's basically it. But, you look at the original art by Jesper Mirfors and just the spooky, these lights over the water and the darkness, and you can feel, I can feel the humidity when I look at this art, and I can hear, the crickets and all of the swamp life when I look at this. And this is back when they used to use flavor text from actual factual literature on these cards. And so, you look at that one, and then they also did an amazing reprint in, I think it was a recent set. Let me just find it here. M25 or Masters 25. They gave this a new version with new art by Rob Alexander. And the flavor text here talks about the House of Ves, which is obviously Liliana and Josu. And even this art is beautiful as well. And so, just amazing art, amazing flavor text, so simple, so pure, and we'll never get it again.
It's just, regeneration is such a weird ability. It takes 4 lines of text to explain what regeneration even does, which is unfortunate. It hurts my soul that the beta version of this is $600. $600?
Where there's a Will o' the Wisp, there's a way.
A way of the Wisp. That's right. Because goodness,
it's a beta magic card.
Yeah, it's crazy that I used to have so many of these.
I'm so glad that you put this on your list, Aaron.
It's great.
This was so close to my list. Because I have indelible memories of when I first started playing Magic. And this card in particular, I have a very specific memory of when I and my family went to Deep Creek Lake in Maryland, which was a place where my family used to go when I lived in Maryland. And I had since moved to Ohio and had made new friends. And we went to Deep Creek Lake with some old family friends and that I hadn't seen in a long time. And they were like, "Oh, you play Magic? I play Magic. We have Magic cards." And we kind of in this cabin in the woods, we figured out we all had Magic cards. And the first card they played was Swamp Will of the Wisp. And I was like, oh, my 6 mana creatures can't get past that ever.
Oops.
And it was like an awakening for me.
Right.
Unfortunately, they don't print Regenerate anymore.
Right.
And I don't think that you can really put this creature becomes indestructible tap it ability on a 1 mana creature. It seems a little too much. But yeah, I love a Will of the Wisp. I think I'm so happy this is on your list.
Yes, it is a wonderful throwback of an option there. All right, let's move on to our number one of Ruben and mine.
Wow.
We share our number one.
What did you guys pick?
Look, I couldn't not. I didn't want to have cards I've had on the top of my list. I can't not have this be the top of my list.
Yeah,
I just couldn't. I made the excuses for Noble Hierarch. I made the excuses for Arcbound Ravager and a bunch of other cards. I needed this.
I can't imagine a world like, look, when as we've discussed, or at least as I discussed many times, you go back in the 90s, right? You go back and they're teaching you how to play Magic. This is easily one of the first play sets of cards that you should get. You should get this play set. You should hold on to this play set. And you should play it forever, because there's never a point in time in which I'm not super excited to see them, super excited to hear about reprints, super excited to hear about anything related to Birds of Paradise.
Oh,
It's Birds of Paradise, y'all. Tell them what it does, Ruben.
It makes me feel good.
It does, doesn't it?
Does it take you to paradise?
It does take me to paradise. Birds of Paradise is 1 green mana for an 0/1 creature with flying. We'll go with the alpha text here. It's a summon mana birds. It has flying, and then there's 2 slash marks. Tap to add 1 mana to your mana pool. This tap may be played as an interrupt.
That's what it does.
That's what it does.
And
it just makes me feel happy. This is my inside out bing bong, right? Like, this is my returning to childhood, remembering what it was like to open a pack of Magic cards. This was the first card that I got a play set of them signed by Mark Poole at the first Origins I ever went to. I played Birds of Paradise in everything because it went in everything. It just is what Magic means to me.
When I came back to Magic and I sort of saw what they had done to the landscape of Standard, how everything was different and changed, I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Where's Birds? And they're like, well, they're not in Standard right now. I'm like, what do you mean they're not in Standard right now? Birds of Paradise, man, it's Birds of Paradise. Who does, like, what? Like, it's like Land of Worlds and stuff back in the day. It's like, what? There's no lightning bolt? What happened to Magic, you know? And so when they came back, when they created Ravnica, and they said Ravnica is the city of guilds, Ravnica is the multicolor block that you've been waiting for, Ravnica is Invasion plus plus, and they said Birds of Paradise, and everyone just lost their crap. It was on. It was time. We got our birds back. It was great. That thing was an all-star from there on out. They brought it back in Magic 2010, which is one of those, like, we're seriously talking about classic Magic. Well, Birds of Paradise, some classic Magic stuff.
Reprint it more. Like, I've seen it was in the mystery booster. It was in the guild kit. It's still $7 or $8. Like, run that baby into the ground. Like,
28 print or 24 printings. Cheapest you can find is like $7, and it's crazy.
why?
Because
And I
it's
gotta
an
say,
amazing Magic card.
Obviously, the Mark Poole version is near and dear to my heart, but the newest Ovidio Cartagena art from Ornithological Studies Secret Lair
It's pretty.
I kind of like it the most.
Yeah.
Like, I know that's kind of heresy to say that, the Mark Poole version comes in second, but I love this version so much.
I like the Magic 2011 promo. This was the promo that was included in like the Walmart packs or repack things that they did. This thing is $45 because you just can't find it really.
Can't find it.
That's so weird. And
I also just
wild.
noticed the difference between the 7th edition and 8th edition. Like, it's technically the same art, but they zoom into it more. You'll notice the 7th edition version is zoomed out just a little bit, and the 8th, it's so weird. Like,
and think about the hype when they previewed the Marcello Vignali version from Ravnica, because we hadn't had Birds of Paradise in Standard.
Yeah.
And then they were like, hey, guess what?
Oh my God. People were
Standard.
losing their minds.
It was like the Beatles came to town.
Dude,
it was wild.
so sick. Everyone was so pumped. Because like, yeah, this is a multicolor block. We got Birds of Paradise. We're doing this now. It's going to be great.
All from a card that was originally the art that Mark Poole turned in for Tropical Island.
yeah.
But they said, this bird is kind of too front and center for it to be about the island, but we'd like to use this art. So they designed a card around the art. and then ask for tropical island art.
And the rest is
Which I
history.
thought was interesting.
There you go. So Birds of Paradise are number 1. That was our top 10. Let's see here. 0 power creatures. You will see them on screen right now if you review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10. And we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me and my bun. Sun's out, bun's out.
Heyo.
right.
Thank you, Ruben.
I'm really excited that we got to go from 0 to hero this episode.
Oh, I'm holding off for a 0.
Move here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AlterSleeves.com, my co-host, Aaron Camel and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at MagicMikes, on Twitter at MagicMikesCast, our Magic Mike subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.